I think one of the most confusing things about growing up is realizing that being a genuinely good person does not guarantee being valued. In fact, sometimes the nicer you are, the less seriously people take you. And that realization is painful because almost everywhere growing up, we are taught the opposite. Be kind, be understanding, be patient, be available for people, love people selflessly, as if kindness automatically creates respect. But real life feels far more complicated than that. Because over the years, I have noticed something uncomfortable. The people who are endlessly available are often the people others become the most comfortable disrespecting. And I don't think it happens suddenly. I think it happens slowly, very slowly. It begins with small things. You reply quickly every time, you adjust constantly, you forgive easily, you try to understand everyone's side. You become emotionally available even when you are exhausted yourself. And initially, it feels beautiful. You feel mature, needed, emotionally dependable. But after a point, something strange starts happening. People stop appreciating your effort because your effort starts feeling permanent to them. Your kindness becomes expected. And once something becomes expected, people stop seeing its value. I think that's one of the saddest thing about human nature. People often notice what might leave, what not what quietly stays. And maybe that's why some of the kindest people eventually becomes quieter with age. Not because they stopped caring, but because they got tired of feeling emotionally consumed. I have personally struggled with this kind a lot. Whenever I cared deeply about someone, whether it was family, relationship, friendships, or even workplaces, my instinct was always the same: to help, to guide, to support, to protect. If I loved someone, I naturally wanted them to grow, and I genuinely believed people would understand the emotion behind it. But many times they didn't. Sometimes they saw concern as interference, care as control, availability as weakness. And slowly I started noticing a pattern. The more emotionally available I became, the less boundaries people assumed I had. And I think this happens to a lot of people who are naturally empathetic because empathy without boundaries slowly teaches people that your emotional energy is always accessible. And once people believe they always have access to you, respect quietly changes. Not always intentionally, not because everyone is evil, but because human being naturally adjust to what becomes constantly available. I think that's why boundaries feel so powerful psychologically. Boundaries communicate something silently. They communicate my time matters, my emotional energy matters, my presence is not unlimited. And strangely, people often respect that more. Not because people hate kindness, but because people unconsciously value what appears emotionally grounded. And honestly, this realization can become emotionally confusing. Because after being hurt repeatedly, you start wondering, should I stop being nice? Should I stop caring so deeply? Or should I become colder? And I think this is where many people change permanently. Some people become emotionally distant, some become transactional, some stop trusting people completely. Not because that's who they truly are, but because they got exhausted from feeling emotionally taken for granted. And I don't think people talk enough about how painful that transition actually feels. Because kind people usually don't enjoy becoming harder. It feels unnatural to them, sometimes even guilty, especially if your identity was always built around being dependable, understanding, emotionally giving. So, when life slowly teaches you to protect yourself more, it almost feels like you are betraying your own nature. And maybe that's the real emotional conflict. Not how do I stop being nice, but how do I remain kind without abandoning myself in the process? I think that's the question many adults are quietly trying to answer. Because kindness itself is not weakness, but kindness without self respect eventually becomes self eraser. And I think many people realize this too late. They spend years overextending themselves emotionally, hoping love, loyalty, patience, or understanding will automatically be reciprocated. And sometimes it is, but many times it isn't. Because relationships become unhealthy when only one person is constantly adjusting. Eventually, people love starts feeling heavy. Eventually, even love starts feeling heavy. And maybe maturity is realizing that boundaries are not the opposite of kindness. They are what protect kindness from turning into exhaustion. Maybe becoming emotionally healthier does not mean becoming cold. Maybe it simply means learning that your compassion also deserves protection. And honestly, I'm still understanding that myself.